One of Trump's top lawyers has quit. Tim Parlatore was one of the attorneys defending Trump against special counsel Jack Smith's investigation into the handling of classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago and the former president's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Parlatore resigned from Trump's legal team this week, saying he informed Trump of the decision directly and he left the legal team on good terms with the former president. Parlatore has called the special counsel's investigation, quote, improper, and repeated his criticism of Jack Smith's investigation in the statement announcing his departure. Joining us now, criminal defense attorney and former Watergate prosecutor John Sale and state attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida, Dave Ehrenberg. Good morning to you both. John, I'll begin with you. He says all the right things, Mr. Parlatore, that he left on good terms. There had been some talk, though, that after hearing Donald Trump at last week's CNN town hall talk so openly and saying, I took what I took about the classified documents, that he no longer could defend him. What's your reading of this move?
Well, Mr. Parlatore has not said anything publicly critical of Donald Trump because ethically that would have been inappropriate. We can speculate as to why he left, but I don't really think it matters. I think what I was thinking when I was coming on this morning is if we went to Hollywood with this script, a former president of the United States, the front runner to be the Republican nominee, and he's already under one indictment, he's likely to be under possibly 2, 3 other indictments. They wouldn't believe it in Hollywood. I mean, this is a crazy world. But Donald Trump has the presumption of innocence by the Constitution that he wanted to suspend. So I don't think we can make any judgments about the fact that Mr. Parlatore left. I mean, I think what we really should focus on is what are the investigations, and I don't care what bravado Donald Trump exhibits. I've represented a lot of people being under investigation, being under indictment in the Manhattan DA. It is not fun. It is stressful. And he is a client that is not going to listen to counsel. That's very, very difficult. And lawyers just, they're independent. And if they give their best advice, if it's not followed, they might move on without any adverse consequence. And just when you're running for president, though, you can't keep your mouth shut. Like any client, I would say, don't say anything. Don't say anything to the media. But when someone's running for president, they can't say, I'm not commenting. So it's just an untenable situation and an unbelievable one.
So, John, obviously, also some of the lawyers for Donald Trump may be in legal hot water themselves. Let's talk about the cases. What is your assessment right now? The Manhattan one is moving forward slowly. We were all eyes towards Georgia in the coming months. Where do you think things go from here?
Well, I think the Fulton County District Attorney was giving a signal to the feds so that they didn't make the same mistake that the Manhattan DA made of starting with the weakest case. I think she was saying, hey, guys, what I'm going to do, and it's probably going to bring indictments, is going to be in the summer. So if you want to do something first, which may be more appropriate, I'm giving you plenty of time. So in sum, we could talk about the investigations forever, but the Mar-a-Lago case, it's all about obstruction. And when everything was fine until they got a subpoena. When they got a grand jury subpoena, that was a game changer. At that point, there was no longer an option to negotiate. The law basically is you have to turn over everything that's called for unless it's privileged. And if something is privileged, there's a procedure. You file a log, what it's called, and you say, hey, I'm not turning over this, this, and this, and this because it's privileged, and a judge will decide. What you cannot do is you cannot prepare a declaration like one of the lawyers did and say, hey, we've done a diligent search and everything's been turned over. You can't do that unless it's true. So what they're investigating is, did Donald Trump hide, conceal, move documents that were under subpoena? And they've called Jack Smith has not been aggressive. I don't like that word. He's been thorough. And they've called in everybody. And they've immunized some of the lawyers, and they've called in even the housekeeper. They've called in at Mar-a-Lago the chef. They've looked at the surveillance tapes. They want to see if Donald Trump personally knew they were moved. And quickly, the January 6th investigation, the main thing I think there, the main witness to see whether or not Donald Trump had the requisite intent of the insurrection is the vice president. And executive privilege is real. It's a real privilege. The conversations between a vice president and a president are sacred, but that's overcome if it's part of a criminal conspiracy. And despite what Mike Pence says publicly, he talked to the president on January 6th, he talked to him before, and he talked to him after. And I think those conversations will show if Donald Trump is personally culpable. But as I said, the Constitution that he trashes, the judges that Trump trashes, they're all going to protect him because that's what our system's all about.
Hey, Dave, it's Sam Stein here. To get back to the original story about the lawyer quitting, look, I know you're a prosecutor, not a defense lawyer, but I'm just sort of curious. Have you ever seen a client like this, someone who steps in it in his own legal cases all the time, who is unreliable in terms of paying for his legal counsel, whose own lawyers end up in legal trouble? If you were approached by Donald Trump to be a defense lawyer, how would you go about even considering the case at this juncture? And I'm curious for your thoughts on what he is like as a client.
Yeah, good to be with you, Sam. As a prosecutor, I don't have to worry about those things. I don't have private clients. I've never seen a client like it. John Sale actually turned down Donald Trump. So it's good to be with John, and he had his own reasons for it. But, you know, to me, what stood out with the departure of Tim Parlatore is that he's the same lawyer who wrote a letter to Congress setting out Trump's defenses. He said that it was Trump's aides, not Trump, who hastily packed up the boxes and shipped them down to Florida. Trump's hands were supposedly clean. And then Trump went on that live town hall meeting the other day and said, no, he's the one who did it. Trump did it himself and had every right to do so. So I think the reason why he withdrew Parlatore is because he was exasperated with his client, along with perhaps knowing that he would become a witness and possibly a defendant in the case himself. He testified before the grand jury. And here's the other thing that I'm wondering about. Now, the New York Times also reported that there were two attorneys left. You've got James Trusty and John Rowley leading Trump's defense. What happened to Chris Kise? Chris Kise is the former Florida Solicitor General, very well respected. He got a $3 million retainer up front, and then he was sidelined by Donald Trump because Trump didn't agree with his advice. Kise wanted Trump to be more conciliatory, more cooperative with DOJ rather than confrontational. So instead, Trump went his own way, the confrontational approach, and look what's happening now. With each misstep, he's getting closer and closer to an indictment, and his lawyers are dropping like flies.